The Life and Times of the Honeybee by Charles Micucci. For thousands of years, the honeybee has been one of our most valuable insects. It has supplied people with honey for sweetening foods, with beeswax for candles, and many, many other useful items. In addition, the honeybee has helped farmers all over the world to increase their fruit and vegetable harvests. Honeybees live in a large group called a colony, and each colony occupies its own hive. Although there may be between 10 and 60,000 bees in a colony, there are only 3 types of bees. There's the worker, the drone, and the queen. The worker bee is the smallest of the bees. She's a female. Thousands of worker bees perform chores in their hive. They make honey, they clean the hive, they feed the larvae, which are the baby bees, and they build the wax comb where all the bees live. Workers are the only honey bees that visit the flowers and collect the nectar. Drones are male bees, and their primary job is to mate with the queen. And the largest bee is the queen, and each colony only has one queen whose most important function is to lay eggs. The worker bee, the female, lives for about 6 weeks, longer in the winter because bees are less active in the winter. The drone lives for about 8 weeks. And a healthy queen may live for up to 4 years and lay over 1 million eggs. In warm weather, a healthy queen will lay 1,000 to 1,500 eggs a day. Her court is formed of 12 workers which guard, clean, and feed her. Here's a cross-section of a hive inside a hollow tree. The comb is made up of thousands of 6-celled wax walls. Honey cells fill the top and circle around the edge of the comb. Bees will eat this honey for energy. Next come pollen cells, and they curve below the honey cells. Pollen is powder the bees take from the flowers, and they eat it for protein, and that protein helps their muscles grow stronger. So first there are the honey cells, then there is the pollen cells, and underneath are what are called brood cells, where workers and drone larvae are raised. They're in the lower portion of the comb. A queen larva cup hangs at the bottom of the comb, a very special section for them. Worker bees will feed their larvae. The drones are so lazy that oftentimes they do not even feed themselves. Like many insects, a honeybee grows in 4 stages, from egg to larva to pupa to adult. All 3 types of bees develop in the same 4 stages, but the time it takes each bee will be different. Queens will grow fastest in 16 days. Workers mature in 21 days and drones in 24 days. They all go through this process. A queen will lay a soft white oval egg at the bottom of a cell in the comb. In 3 days, a worm-like form called a larva will hatch from the egg. Fed by worker bees, the larva grows much larger. And then the larva spins a cocoon, and inside that cocoon, a pupa will develop from the larva. It starts to look more like an insect than like a worm. It grows eyes, legs, and wings. Finally, an adult bee will chew its way out of the cell. Worker bees will start their life by caring for and feeding larvae. They will feed royal jelly to the queen, and they'll feed bee milk to the worker and drone larvae for the first 3 days. And after that, they will feed bee bread to the larvae. Royal jelly for the queen is a milky yellow syrup that young worker bees secrete from glands inside their heads. It's high in protein. Bee milk, which is fed to the drones and the worker bee larvae, is similar to royal jelly, but it's not as nutritious. And the bee bread is a mixture of honey and pollen. and that will be fed to the larva after 3 days. Here is the worker bee. When she crawls out of her cell, she's already fully grown. And even though she's 1/2 inch long and weighs only 1/250th of an ounce, she contributes more than any other type of bee to the daily survival of her colony. A honeybee has 2 types of eyes. She has a compound eye, and there are over 3,000 lenses in that eye that can sense ultraviolet light. That's an invisible light to humans. With ultraviolet light, the bee can see what flowers have the most nectar. She also has 3 simple eyes on the top of her head, and they act as light sensors, so a bee can see the sun even if it's hidden by the clouds. She has a tongue that she will suck up the nectar with, and she has jaws which she will chew wax to form the cells in the hive. She'll use her front arms to move, legs like arms, to move flower parts and to dust off her antenna. She'll use her middle legs to brush pollen out of the thousands of branched hairs that cover her. And she will place them in a pollen sac or a pollen basket on the outside of the back legs. That's where she stores her pollen to bring it back to the hive. She'll secrete beeswax on the underside of her abdomen. When she sucks up the nectar from her tongue, she has 2 stomachs. The honey sac is where the bee stores the nectar that will be made into honey. The midgut is where she will digest her own food for energy. A honeybee has very powerful wings. She has 2 pairs of them, and they can beat 250 times a second. A bee can fly more than 12 miles an hour and flies forward, but can also fly backward and sideways. There are busy days for that house bee. For the first 3 weeks, the female bee, the honeybee worker bee, will perform chores inside of the hive. House bees clean the hive, feed the larvae, build wax combs, store food, and defend the hive against enemies. No bee tells the house bees which chores need to be done. Instead, each bee is guided by an inner clock. They do certain chores on certain days of the first few days of their life. On day 1 to 2, when a worker bee is first born, she will clean her cell and she will clean the cells around it. On day 3 to 5, she will feed bee bread to older drones and worker bee larvae. During days 6 to 11, she will feed bee milk to young drone and worker larvae and royal jelly to the queen. And during day 12 to 17, a bee's wax glands are the most active. Bees may hang from one another so that their wax will flow more smoothly from their wax glands. And then with her jaws, each bee will shape wax into honeycombs, 6-sided cells. Bees that are not making bees that are not making wax will store food in honeycombs during those days, which will be made into honey. And they will store them in honey cells and pack pollen into the pollen cells. Day 18 to 21, during their last days in the hive, some workers will guard the entrance. When alarmed, a guard bee emits a scent that warns all the other bees of the danger. A guard bee will give her life to protect the hive and its honey. In the summer, during the last 3 weeks of a worker bee's life, she will leave the hive and fly through the fields and the meadows, and she'll visit the flowers. She will make about 10 journeys every day, and each flight will last about an hour and will usually be made within 3 miles of the hive. A field bee takes off on her first flight before the dew dries on the flowers in the morning, and she will return from her last trip at sunset. During her travels, a field bee gathers water, bee glue, nectar, and pollen, which the colony needs to survive. She will drink in the nectar, and she will dust off the pollen from her antenna into the pollen basket on her leg. With her ultraviolet vision, a field bee will see dark shapes that indicate what flowers are rich in nectar. She'll land on the flower's petals and search with her antenna for the sweet-smelling nectar. She'll suck up that nectar. She won't digest it, but she'll store it in her honey sac. And while the field bee flies to the hive, her honey sac simplifies the sugar in her nectar so that it can change into honey. When a field bee arrives at her hive, she'll transfer nectar to a house bee, tongue to tongue. The house bee will then spread a droplet of nectar on the roof of a honey cell where the nectar begins to dry. During the next couple of days, other bees will fan their wings over that honeycomb. Fanning will evaporate the moisture in the nectar, which is 80% water, and honey is only 19% water. And finally, other house bees cap the honey cells with a thin layer of wax. Inside, the thickened nectar ages and becomes honey and has a shelf life of thousands of years. Honeybees dance. That's how they communicate. They show other field bees where the flowers are by dancing on the honeycomb in their hive. The round dance says flowers are close to the hive or less than 100 yards away. The bee will circle in one direction and then turn around and circle back in the other direction. The round dance does not show the exact location of the flowers, so bees fly out in many directions looking for them, always staying within 100 yards of the hive as the dance instructed. The tail wagging dance says, let me draw you a map. The flowers are a little further away, or at least